He has provided a unique understanding of how Muslims can be involved in the world, in a pluralistic world, in a complex world, stressing interfaith dialogue in a particular way that it has not been stressed before. My name is Whit Bodman. I teach comparative religion at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Austin, Texas. And my special area of study is Islam. I first came into contact with the Hizmet movement when I moved down here from Massachusetts, and a group approached me to explain the movement and to ask me about Jalaluddin Rumi, who was an important person in my life and my study. And we did some initial interviews about Rumi. And since then, I have been involved with the movement here in Austin and in Texas for 11 years now. I've never met Fethullah Gulen, though I have wanted to. He seems to be a remarkable leader who has given something very unique to the world and to Islam and to all of us who are interested in Islam, and even those of us who aren't. He has provided a unique understanding of how Muslims can be involved in the world, in a pluralistic world, in a complex world, stressing interfaith dialogue in a particular way that it has not been stressed before. It is a relationship based on virtue. We know of the Islamic tradition, or I know of the Islamic tradition in terms of Islamic law and practice and a very specific guide for life, but that is there in the Hizmet movement. But what is there as prominently are certain basic virtues of how one acts in the world, how one treats other people, and how one conducts one's life. And those are very prominent, and that is something not unique, but unique in its expression, and it's important to the Hizmet movement. And that seems to be what he has taught us. I think Sheikh Gulen, I really like to refer to him as a sheikh because he is such an honorable person and such a leader, but he has contributed a movement that has gained such strength that its impact is felt everywhere. One of the fascinating things to me have been the schools worldwide. I was in Turkey, and through a trip organized by the Hizmet movement by friends here in Austin and Houston, and I met a man who had been teaching in Nepal. And that to me was amazing, that a Turkish man would go to Nepal and others to Madagascar, very far from Turkey, to set up schools. I visited some of the schools in Turkey, and they were wonderful schools with lots of awards for teaching high-quality math and the sciences. The students were this is probably the wrong word, but very professional looking. They were well-dressed, they were polite, they were engaging. They came up to us and wanted to have conversation with us, where at other times you might think students would shy away from that. So this whole education movement that is worldwide, that takes a particular gift of education to places like Madagascar, like Nepal, where they otherwise do not have opportunities for such advanced schooling. You know, that was very impressive. And another aspect is the emphasis on interfaith dialogue. The movement has approached its work in Austin and in the United States in a very professional way. This is not just gathering a few people around for interfaith dialogue. The movement has engaged leaders, political leaders, educational leaders, social leaders, and involved them in learning about Islam, but also in showing some interest in learning about Christianity. Sometimes in interfaith dialogue, you have mutual teaching. I teach you about Christianity, you teach me about Islam, and that's not really dialogue. Dialogue goes further into exploring questions for which the answers are not immediately evident. And that has been the spirit of dialogue here, involving some of the leaders of the community and taking them to Turkey to experience a Muslim country firsthand. That is exceptional also. Interfaith dialogue between Muslims and non-Muslims has been going on since almost the beginning of Islam. So this is not something new. But in every generation, it has to be reinvented because our culture changes, the political and cultural and social and international dynamics change. So, and we have new generations of individuals who do not know the history very well. And so, in a sense, we have to reinvent interfaith dialogue in every generation. Now there are many obstacles to interfaith dialogue, particularly in the United States. There is Islamophobia. There's a great fear of Islam and its influence in the United States, a far exaggerated fear, really a fictional fear, but it's there. And those of us committed to interfaith dialogue are struggling with this. I was going to teach a class on the Quran the other day, and the news from the Middle East and from Nigeria was horrible. How do you explain to Americans who read in their newspapers about violence among Muslims and by Muslims throughout the world? When I address them in classes and in churches and in community centers, they are very suspicious of Islam, and I can't blame them, given what they hear on the news and what they read in the newspapers. But I have to try to explain how a few people can make a whole tradition look horrible. And that's a challenge. I am helped by Muslims who come along with me, but it's important that they hear it from me. Hizmet movement represents a particular combination of elements of Islam. It brings together an attention to Islamic practice, to a tradition that guides its followers in a very specific way of life that makes one conscious of every minute of the day that you are operating in a particular way, living in a particular way as a Muslim. It draws also from the mystical dimension, drawing particularly from Jalaluddin Rumi, 13th century mystic, founder of the Mevlevi order, but also Bediüzzaman Nursi, a modern mystic, a modern teacher a modern writer whose works are very inspiring, very wise. And with that dimension is combined with what I would call the pietist dimension, a dimension of Islam that takes its practice very seriously. But it also draws from the intellectual tradition, from an attention to the way Islam informs modern intellectual and academic pursuits in the way of science in particular. Some see science and religion as opposed to each other, but in the Hizmet movement, those have been brought together. And I think another aspect is service, that bringing the pietist part, the mystical part, and the service aspect and the intellectual aspect is a fairly potent combination. The service aspect takes Muslims out of their own communities into the world, serving other communities that are not Muslim, but they are Christian, they are Buddhist, and they are animist, they are nothing perhaps. But nevertheless, the spirit of service to other communities is really part of the rich tradition of Islam, but not often expressed. In too many parts of the Islamic world, we see Muslims very much absorbed in taking care of people, but taking care of their own. Here, there is an inspiration to take care of others, to take care of people regardless of their creed, the color of their skin, or their nationality. And that is a unique combination.